In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create quizzes and tests in Desire to Learn. On the Assessments drop-down menu, click on Quizzes. The Quizzes page shows all of the quizzes that you have in your course, their status. You'll notice that some of these are inactive in this instructor's course. There's also a Question Library tab and a Statistics tab at the top. We're going to focus now on the Manage Quizzes tab. Let's click on the New Quiz button. Big blue button is probably the right thing to do. And you'll see that when you're creating a quiz, you have more tabs at the top of the New Quiz screen than on any other item creation screen. That's because there's a lot of flexibility built into the quiz tool in Desire to Learn. So let's give it a name. Here's a sample Unit 1 quiz. I can put this into a category, or if the category that I want isn't there, I can add a category on the fly. I can also associate this quiz with a grade item, and this is the drop-down menu that shows you how to do that. If the grade item that I want doesn't exist, I can also add that on the fly. An important item to notice here is that once you create an association with a grade item, allow automatic export to grades becomes an option. Select this if your quiz contains only objective questions. In other words, the system can grade everything, and that way your students can see their grades right off the bat once they're done with the quiz. If you have some subjective items in there like essays or short answer or fill in the blank, it's a good idea to leave that box unchecked because the system will report on any objective items and won't report on the subjective items. So if you have 100 points in your quiz and 50 of those points are for essays, even if your student got everything right, they would still see only 50 points and might panic a little. You can also, here on the Properties tab, add a rubric, or you can create one in a new window on the fly. Allow this attempt to be set as graded immediately upon the student completing it. If you have to go in and manually do a few things, probably leave that box checked. Also, there are some advanced properties for this particular quiz item. You can allow hints, and we'll show you what those are in a little bit. You can also notify yourself or someone else every time a student completes this particular quiz. And there are also two options underneath here that are really good for academic integrity. Disable right-click. Always check that box. What that means is when a student is taking the quiz or exam that they can't right-click and use the copy selections. Also disable pager and alerts. If you remember, Desire to Learn allows students and you to send instant messages, pagers, alerts, have chat windows open. This disables all of those tools while someone is in a quiz. There's also some message fields here, so you can give a description of the quiz, and this is the usual text box that you're used to seeing from other tools in Desire to Learn. You can also provide an introduction to the quiz that will display before the student actually enters the quiz. Scroll back up to all of those tabs. Let's take a look at some of the other ones. On the Restrictions tab, you'll notice that every quiz starts off as inactive. This is so if you are still working on your quiz, students don't see the partial quiz and then go in and take it. So remember, when you're done putting the quiz together, come back to the Restrictions tab and make it an active quiz. Here, of course, you can also set your start and end dates for the quiz, provide release conditions, and you even have timing options here on the Restrictions tab. So you can put a password for the quiz, set a time limit, enforce the time limit, show a countdown clock, provide a grace period for people who are submitting after that time limit, allow people to submit the quiz after the time limit, allow them to submit it late but only during certain numbers of minutes, or auto-submit attempt means once that time limit is reached, the student's quiz is automatically submitted no matter whether they've hit save or submit or not. And down here under Advanced Availability is where you can provide students with learning disabilities or perhaps a death in the family or they've been traveling. This is where you can provide individual students special access to this particular quiz. There's also an Attempts tab, and that Attempts tab allows you to say how many times can students actually go in and take this quiz. Unlimited if it's a review quiz or perhaps ungraded, and then up to 1 through 10. If you do choose a multiple number, you can also choose, does the system keep the highest, average, the first attempt, the last attempt, or even the lowest attempt? So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how many attempts are allowed. We're going to skip over objectives and go to Submission Views. On this tab, the default is that once a student is completely done with the quiz, hits submit, the student is able to see feedback immediately, and that the questions aren't shown, and students don't see any statistics. If you click this Add Additional View button, this allows you to change the submission views. Give this submission view outline a name, You can put in a message to remind yourself what it's about. View restrictions. You can have your students able to take this quiz, but they won't be able to see their results until maybe after the due date, and you can set that here. Or they won't see their results until after the second attempt. And if you choose an attempt, you can get a minimum and maximum score as well. Students won't see their feedback unless they achieve a maximum score of 65%, which means anybody under 65% might see feedback. Here are some study guides. Also, you have powerful and customizable tools for whether students see the questions. And then only the ones they got right, only the ones they got wrong, only the ones that they responded to, or only the ones that they didn't. Do you show the question answers? Do you show individual scores and how many points they got out of the individual scores? These are all customizable fields. Also, do you want to show students their score and their overall attempt score? And can you show them some statistics? Well, these fields allow you to do that. Show the class average or show the distribution of scores. Click Save here, and it takes us back to that Edit Quiz screen. And the last item is the item that most people associate with the quiz, which is the questions. So click on Layout and Questions, and that will take you to a screen where you can click Add and Edit Questions, and that pops open this quiz editing screen. The big blue button here is New, and the action menu drops down. Here you can put in true or false, multiple choice, multiple selection, so people have to choose more than one, long and short answer, matching. There's a lot of different options here. You can also put in sections of the quiz, and you can also randomize those sections. For the purposes of our demonstration, let's create a multiple choice question. You can give the question a title. You say how many points this particular question is worth. I'll key in 4. And there's also a difficulty rating. It's optional. In the question text, you can paste in. You can also use the insert stuff or insert media or images. So you've got a lot of different methods by which you can ask the question. In this case, let's use a simple key-in question. What is a flavor of ice cream? You can also add an image file and provide a description for the image if you want people to look at a particular picture. Down here under Options, there's an option for enumeration. For multiple choice, what that means is, do you want an A, B, C, D, or a 1, 2, 3, 4 to display next to each of the choices, and what's the format that you'd like for that? You can also have those choices display vertically, one on top of the other, horizontally, in a row, or in a drop-down menu, so people have to actually click on the drop-down to see the options. You can also randomize the options within the question, and you can add more options than the typical 4 distractors. I'll click on a text box. So what's a flavor of ice cream? I'll put in vanilla. Down here, what's definitely not a flavor of ice cream? Gravel. Down on the third choice, let's call it tar. So that's definitely not a flavor of ice cream. But for the fourth option, I want to put in something that could be a flavor of ice cream, but might not be something that people would want to eat. I'm going to put in pickle. I'll scroll back up to the top of these distractors here, and I can even put in feedback. This is definitely a flavor of ice cream. Now, in many other learning management systems, this for the multiple choice is where you would start looking for the little radio button to select which one is the correct answer. In Desire to Learn, you can always give partial credit for anything. So the weights here, if this is a 100% correct answer, I'll give it 100%. Gravel is 0%, tar is 0%, pickle, well, we might give 50%. Remember, we keyed in that this was a 4-point question, so if someone selected pickle, they'd get 2 points. So in Desire to Learn, there is that flexibility to assign partial credit to just about anything. Down here, there's also a question hint if you wanted to give hints and you had it turned on. And there's also question feedback, so general feedback no matter what students have responded to this question. So I could save this question, save and create a new question, or even preview the question so that you see it as students see it. I'll click on Save. This takes us back to the quiz question screen, and once I'm finished putting in questions and sections, I can click on this Done button. Back here on the Layout and Questions tab, now that I have questions, I can show how many questions per page to show to students, and also I can edit the layout of how the quiz is displayed to students. I can also prevent students from moving backwards, so if they answer the first 4 or 5 questions on a page, then they can't get back to those if they move forward through the quiz. So a lot of different flexible options here. I'll click Save and Close, scroll down to my sample Unit 1 quiz, and here's a nice tool for instructors, Preview, which allows us to see everything that our students are going to see as they're taking this quiz. So this is probably the best final thing to do, is actually preview your quiz, and this is what your students will see. So I'll select my 50% answer, I'll save it. You'll notice that question number 1 over here now turns blue to show that that answer has been locked in and saved, and I can go to submit my quiz, and it shows me my preview and score. That's how you do quizzes, and that's how you take a look at them so that you can preview them so that you can see them as your students see them.